All right, Wolves fans, we're back. Not going to act like we didn't just record this for the second time, but we're here. Episode 2, Season 5. 2-1 after 3 games. And honestly, I don't think you can complain much there, honestly.
No, I think there's been little points in between where maybe you could very well complain. There's been certain situations where definitely are complaining worthy. But I think overall, coming out of that tough first week of the schedule, it doesn't even matter who we play. Always the first week of the schedule is always tough. Coming out of that with a winning record, I don't think there's much to complain about as a whole. I think.
Yeah, I think the first game of the year I think is always tough because no matter what happens, like there's going to be overreactions to pretty much everything that happens within the game. So it's like, obviously, against the Lakers, it was a pretty brutal game. I mean, me and you were watching that, and I don't think a lot of good came out of that first game, but
Well,
I think we were both in the mindset that, hey, first game, you kind of got to give this some time, and I think like incrementally. This past week, we've seen some improvement in some areas. But yeah, I mean, it's what week into the season. I think it's never going to be perfect 1 week into the season. I don't care which team you are.
no, and I think I don't know. I think we're a lot of people, or at least me in general. Like I think I underestimated how big of a deal it would be losing Cat, someone who's been the center point of our offense for the last 10 years. Um, just having him gone, I mean, like everything's going to look a little differently. And yeah, it's just going to take some time. And it was just that first game just felt so weird. Like it almost reminded me of like 5 years ago when Anthony's rookie season. Just like it was just a bad team that first game. Like there was no chemistry. No one was passing the ball. No one was moving. It was just an ugly game. And sitting in my basement watching that with you, man, I was like, oh God, that's bringing me back. And
And
I hope it's not going to be a trend.
I mean, I think we both kind of had this thought too, but like you touched on Cat, and I think both of us kind of forget like, and kind of the general Wolves fan base too. Like, I think you have that same squad last year running it back for that game. I mean, I think they probably win that game, but um, mostly because of like Cat can really score the ball in a variety of different ways, and also I think defensively was kind of the big key point in that first game where realistically probably would have wanted Cat on AD and having Rudy kind of in the role of help side and being able to protect the rim. But I mean, the kind of the reality of like the situation now is Rudy's going to have to take on those matchups, and obviously there's a few players that Rudy really struggles with one on one, and they're mostly the skilled bigs like the ADs, the Sabonis's. Actually, two of Rudy's worst matchups have happened in the first 2 games. Like those guys always give him trouble. It's those pretty fast bigs. So I don't know. I think one of my biggest takeaways from the first few games has just been like the overall like kind of change a little bit in defensive identity. Like I don't know if you felt that, but like I think last year we were just so like I don't know, it was just such a back of the mind thought that like this team was going to compete every night and try really hard on defense and we were always going to be locked in. That was kind of the part of the game that was always going to stay the same. But I think you've seen like 2 out of the 3 games so far this year. I think like they've had pretty big lapses during games defensively. So I mean that'll be a big growing point. And I know that's the first thing we're touching on here is kind of a downside of what it's looked like the first 3 games, but it's true. It's just kind of a change. There's new personnel in there, and I think it's going to take some time for the defense to come together. But I will say I like the effort a little bit better the last 2 games
Yeah.
defensively.
I think that first game was awkward just in a lot of different ways. It just felt like a game where, and I know it's hard to back up pros who are going into their first game of their season and say that, maybe they came out a little sloppy and maybe they weren't fully ready. And I don't know, that game it didn't feel like we were ready to play. It felt like there was a lot bigger stuff going on in that game, i.e., JJ Redick's first game, Bronny James. Like it just felt like we let that stuff maybe distract us from really playing our game, and it was so like it was so great to see in the last two games. And, finally stuff started clicking, and we started to see, and that was just very relieving to see that we still have it, and we're not just that team from the first game because that was tough. That was a tough game to watch, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there was definitely some like circumstances outside of the game that were huge that night, obviously with Bronny. But like, I think like inside the game, it actually felt like the Wolves were playing, I don't know, the Trailblazers on a Tuesday night. That's kind of how they felt,
Yeah,
like watching them. Like
it
that's
was a
how
tough
Ant
game.
felt. That's how Julius felt. I mean, that's kind of how the whole team felt. But I don't know. I think the last two games, like the Kings game, was super fun, super high octane, and then last game too. I think last game was overall their best game, but obviously a little bit of a scare in the fourth there. But like I think overall they've progressed at least in these first three games. I know I touched on the defensive side kind of being a downside of what we've been seeing, but one of the upsides I really like is I think like this team probably has a higher offensive ceiling than what we saw last year. Obviously, they were kind of, I would say, middle to bottom pack, and I think they were. It was like 18th or 19th in offensive rating, and I think this year they can be a top 10 team offensively. I think they have the spacing to do it now, and I think they have the 3-point shooters to do it now, which is like if you've watched the last three games, that's kind of been the biggest change I've seen
I was just about to
offensively. Is
say,
just the amount of 3-pointers they're
is
getting up
that
is
is
pretty
that the
crazy.
biggest point of emphasis, do you think, going into the season for Chris Finch and the staff is just get as many, like they're just launching so many threes, especially Anthony Edwards. I mean, I w- going into last night's game, I think he was averaging 14 threes shot a game. Um, and yeah, it's just a different look, and it's a more modern look. I feel like last year when we were playing with the two bigs, it worked at times, but it was also like maybe we were kind of going back in time, or maybe we were trailblazing the path to the future of the league, the new future. But now it feels like we're kind of settling back into what successful teams, for example, the Warriors, have done in the past. Now we're just trying to get up as many threes as possible. And that's exciting. But when they're not going in, that's tough to watch. But also, I don't know. I think it's just interesting how that's changed, especially given that Carl Anthony Towns is the self-proclaimed best big man shooter of all time, and it took us getting rid of the best big man shooter of all time to start shooting more threes.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's kind of just like a math deal. Like you're kind of giving away Cat's 40% 3-point shooting for Dante DiVincenzo's 3-point shooting, and you're getting also Julius Randle. So like those two kind of cancel each other out, like albeit different positions. But like Julius Randle at the end of the day is going to be that like that piece that is like, hey, if he's shooting 40% from three point, which right now I'd have to check the exact number. Yeah, he's shooting 53.8% on over 4 attempts per game from 3. So, if you're getting, like obviously, that number's not gonna stay the same, but he's, prior in his career, shot 40% from the three-point line before. Um, but yeah, I think that's kind of like been the overall trend so far is like they've been getting up a lot of threes. Some players have been making a lot of them. I know Ant's taken over 13 threes a game, but he's made five. He's shooting around 37, 38%.
Mhm.
Julius Randle above 50%.
Nikhil
But then
shooting.
yeah, Nikhil was the other name I was going to mention. He's been awesome too. But then you have players like Jade McDaniels and obviously Mike Conley and there's a couple others that haven't had the biggest jumps in the 3-point percentage yet.
But that's why this sport is so beautiful, man. It's some guys step up, other guys have rough weeks. It's a game of runs, kind of like baseball. They're gonna hit their shots sometimes they're not. Uh,
100%. Nikhil's shooting 70% from 3-point line.
I'm
I
loving
want to say
Nikhil,
this year
man. I
too.
think he might be my favorite player so far. But I want to get in to two players to start. I think we should talk about Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. I'm gonna let you start with Dante. What are your official thoughts on Dante so far?
I like it, man. I think he gives this team exactly what they didn't have last year, which is the movement and the cutting and the 3-point shooting off the dribble too. Like I think those are all pretty big recipes to what's going to make this team successful. And he's only shooting 28% from 3 to start the year, but I really like the shot selection. I think last game you really saw his shot start to fall, and you can kind of see what he provides. And like speaking of Donte, I know there's like all this talk about the starting lineup with Julius and Rudy and Jaden, Mike, Ant. Um, is it a hot take to say that Donte should have closed out the game the past two games? Is that too hot of a take to say? I mean, he's been one of the five best players on the team so far, and that's
I
all
think
you could hope for.
I think he is one of the best five players. Not that he has been. I think he is one of the best five players, and that was a point I was going to come up with. Is I think we talk about how great of a trade that could have been if Donte ends up being the 3-point threat that he is. But he's gotta be playing cat numbers, cat minutes. We got to be able to find a way to get him um, more minutes. I think, and I think he should be out there closing the game. I think he's a guy with playoff experience. He knows how to win in the playoffs. He hits big shots in the playoffs. But again, man, it's so early in the season. I think that maybe that's something he's going to have to grow into. He's going to have to grow into that trust with the coaching staff. But yeah, I think by the end of the season, I don't think there's any doubt that Dante DiVincenzo finishes all the games, and I think he'll be starting all the games as well.
Yeah, and so right now he's playing 27 minutes per game. And again, these are super small sample sizes, like we're
Right.
3 games in. But you also look at other players like Rudy, who's playing 36 minutes per game, and Ants almost upwards of 40 minutes per game. Like those numbers are not going to be what they are
Not
at
sustainable.
the end of the year. And I think most of that is probably Finch just rolling with the guys he has had in the past couple of years to
Yeah,
close out those lineups. So you'll see Ant's number come down to around 36, 35. You'll see Rudy's go down to 31, 32, and I'm sure you'll see Dante's go up at least to 30. So I think it's, partially just kind of figuring out the rotations. Like I think these past 3 games we've seen like I can't. It must be like 9 or 10 different lineup combinations, even with 8 guys. Like there's only been 8 guys, 8, 9 guys playing in the rotation right now, but the amount of combinations he's been rolling out has been super different. And I think that's kind of expected when you have a new team, trying to find the one that really works. And I think at least the top 3, in my opinion, have Dante DiVincenzo in them and are some mix of just space and pace lineups. It seems like that's kind of the bread and butter and where this offense has really thrived. And again, like it's not going to be the same defense it was, but lineups with Julius and Nas at the front court, and then you have the Dante, Mike, Ant lineups. Like I think those ones have been the most visually pleasing or appealing. I don't know what the right word is, but like
pleasing.
that's it's. I
It's
think
fun.
they just
Fun
have
to watch, man.
It is. They have the versatility to do a lot of different things, and that's good.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of people have been talking about the depth that the Wolves had this year, and I think that is going to be the most underrated part of this season. And I think this was a huge problem last year. Is Anthony Edwards he got so tired in the playoffs, and I think it's because he played every single night, and that's a great part about him. That's a great part about his character and his work ethic is he's not going to sit out games. But I think now with his depth, you can find ways to play him less minutes in those games that don't mean as much. And then now we have the depth to give other guys more minutes. Now we have guys that we can place in there and say, oh, you get some more minutes than Ant, you're not going to play as much. Or maybe you're not even going to play at all. Because you see these teams that have long runs in the playoffs is their guys they don't play every game. And I don't think that necessarily is the worst thing in the world if Anthony Edwards sits some games out, rests, keeps those legs fresh. I think or I hope that is the direction the Wolves are going in because that's a more mature approach to the playoffs. Now that we've been there, we got to be able to take things away from that, and we have the team now to where we don't need to rely on Anthony Edwards playing 40 minutes a game.
How have you felt about 3 games in how he's been? Like I feel like he's been like I don't know, he's been a really confusing player. I feel like these
Yeah,
first couple games.
he's changed as a player, and I don't know if that's he's changed, man. He went to the Olympics. He's now the face of the league. He now is the face of our team. There's no one else. It's just him. And he's playing different. And I think he's trying to figure out who he is and how far he needs to be different from what he was last year. But yeah, I think Anthony Edwards is at his best when he's passing the ball and getting to the cup. I like Anthony Edwards shooting threes, but I love Anthony Edwards attacking the cup, passing the ball, getting everyone involved. And when he does that, it's great. but when he's pulling up threes right away. I think in the Lakers game, it was the fourth quarter before he even had one assist.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not how this team works. So I think that that's just going to be a growing pain. It's going to take some time because Anthony, he knows that when he's passing the ball, when he's driving to the hoop, everything opens up for everyone else. And I think that's pretty obvious to see. And I know the coaches are going to be telling that. So I think it's going to take some time. How is he going to adjust? And this is a huge thing. He's had Cat with him his whole career. How is he going to adjust to being the single guy? Um, so yeah, I haven't been too impressed with him, if I'll be honest. There's been flashes where I'm like, oh yeah, that's the Anthony Edwards, and this guy might even be better than the Anthony Edwards I know. But I haven't been fully like this hasn't been a great start to the season for him.
Yeah, I think like he's having kind of like a minor identity crisis right now, and I don't know how to like explain it, but like yeah, you can kind of understand it from the 3-point volume. Like it's way up from where it was last year,
Such
and
a
like
change.
I think last year though too, like he did get to the rack, but I think he got to the rack less last year than he did even the year prior. So I think like and he said this before. He says, you know, getting to the cup is like super taxing. It's well, obviously it's way harder to, you know, get to the basket, go through and finish than just pulling up an open three. So it's kind of expending your energy at the right points. I will say I'm pretty impressed with like how locked in and engaged he is. I think there's less of the like miscues getting backdoored on defense or just not paying attention off ball. So I really like what I'm seeing there. But yeah, I think the shooting percentage is down just because the 3-point volume is really high this year, and I think like there's definitely opportunities to drive and kick, and I think he found it a little bit in the last quarter of the Kings game, and last game I think was a lot better too. Um, but yeah, just getting downhill, playing the 2-man game with Julius. I do like when they do that. I think they've kind of found that too a little bit last game where they're up top, giving it back and forth, a little hot potato. Julius sets the screen, Ant dives. Like I think there's a lot of that too that's going to be happening over the next few games. So I'm excited though. Like I think the results haven't been exactly the jump from 4 to 5 yet, but I think there's elements there where it could happen.
Yeah, I'm not worried at all. I want to make that clear. I'm not worried at all about Ant. Um, and I think the volume 3-point shooting could end up making him a better player overall. Yeah, I think they definitely sat down this summer and said, we want you shooting more three. Like this is definitely a calculated thing based off of 3 games, how many more threes he's shooting. It's definitely a change that the coaching staff and him have decided upon. But yeah, now it's how do you balance that? Because I'm wondering how much he's thinking about that every game. How much is he thinking about, well, I got to get more of my threes up, and then he's not necessarily relying on getting to the cup.
I
And yeah,
will say though, like the Kings game, like you know, previously his go-to end of game shot is the step back three or the fadeaway three, and it's not a great shot. And we haven't really ever seen Anthony Edwards hit a buzzer beater in
no,
4 years because his shot selection is so bad in the clutch that there's not a lot of opportunities for it. But in the Kings game, you saw him make the right decision with a give and go to Mike to create a little space, and then he got right to the cup, gets free throws with a couple seconds left, and wins the game. So it's like there's flashes of like he's balancing that 3-point shooting and knowing what he needs to do and being a little more mature at the end of the game. So like that stuff's really exciting. And then like I know the threes we're talking about is a little bit of a detriment right now to his finishing, but it's like that Kings game, if he doesn't hit two huge threes at the end of the game, they're not even in it. Like
he's
they
hitting
could
them.
lose that game. So it's give and take with him.
Yeah, no, and yeah, he's hitting the threes. He's playing well. He's playing well, just not great yet. And I think we'll see him make leaps and bounds before the season's over. And I think he will end the season where he was at in that Nuggets series, not necessarily in the Mavericks series.
Yeah.
Um, but let's get into the. I think at least in my Timberwolves group chats, that's kind of how I use to um, balance how the Wolves fan base is feeling. The most polarizing player so far has been Julius Randle. I would say he had a rough debut, an amazing second game, and a great ending to the third game. What are your thoughts on Julius Randle right now? What are your thoughts on Julius Randle long term? Let's hear what you got to say, man.
Yeah, I think it's like it's tough to look at things like right in the moment because like yeah, we're seeing like the Lakers game was I mean pretty brutal, but that's a lot of that's expected with him not playing for a while, and that's his first game with a brand new team. And then we'll talk about last game. I think beforehand, like it really rough start, like turnovers, pretty non lacking attention on defense, I think was one thing. But then the Kings game, you're like, this is a top 10 player in the league, what he
Yeah,
just did to that Kings team. So it's like, I don't know, like 50,000 foot view after these 3 games. Like I'm pretty happy actually so far with what we've got from Julius Randle. I think like the stat line from last game, that 24, 10, and 5 area is something that like if he lives in there, this team can go like a really really long way because they need that secondary like creator. They
dude,
didn't really have that with Cat was just either shoot or drive. Like Julius can actually create similar to how Ant can do it off the bounce. So I think so far I've been really happy with this. I like Randall. I'll
dude.
say it.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I hate to say that. I think the Wolves really might have found a gem in Randall. And I don't know if he's really if that you can even say that about him because he's an all-star, because he's was a superstar at one point, maybe, but there's been flashes where I've seen Julius like he can play, and I think he might even be a perfect fit for what the Wolves are trying to do. And just exactly what you're saying, he can catch the ball on the left wing, back him down, do his little footwork, get right to the cup every single time. Where he kind of does that drop step where I think he drives right and then kind of spins into the left side, and every
Yep.
time he can get that, but he's also looking to pass. He can
Yes.
create. He's a great passer, and exactly what Grady is always saying: bullies get bullied when Julius Randle's playing. Man, I love the way he plays. And yeah, it's gonna take a lot of time, I think, for him to build the chemistry and get used to our offense and our defensive intensity, what we expect with the Timberwolves. I think that's going to take some time, and he might not ever fully be able to get to that elite defensive level. Um, but yeah, it seems like he wants to be here. It seems like Ant likes him. Um, yeah, I think he has potential to really take this team to the next level. And like we've been saying all along, if he's not the guy, we don't have to. We're not stuck with him, and I think that's the whole beauty with this race. We're not stuck with Julius Randle long term. But we might have found a gem just from flashes of what we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think my main takeaway is like Julius Randle for $30 million is an absolute steal for this season at least. Like this is a great rental, a great piece, no matter how you spin it. Whether it doesn't work out down the line, you can trade it mid-season. You can still, re-sign him to keep that calories or I don't know salary cap slot
Well,
too. Like
neither of us can talk right now.
no, no,
I'm struggling speaking right now.
rough bear like I think the Bears game really turned my head off for the like this is a struggle to even get into this podcast right now, but I'm excited because Julius Randle, like the past 2 games I've really been excited for what this team could do. So it's
I just love him,
I,
man. You know my favorite Julius Randle play by far is. Do you know what it is?
mine is the pass out of the post to Mike in the corner for the 3 during the Kings game. I don't know if you saw that one, but it was clutch time. He's backing Sabonis down. Perfect bounce pass as Mike's moving to the corner, 3 point. Like that's been my favorite part of him so far. It's been the passing.
My favorite Julius Randle play was the last play of the Raptors game. I think Ant gets the steal, tosses it up
Pass
to
to
Julius.
Julius. Yep.
Julius, he could do a little windmill dunk. He could, if he can't do that anymore, he could do a little two-handed hang on the rim. He doesn't even think of it. The minute he catches the ball, he passes it right back to Ant.
Reward the man.
Selfless, man. That's selfless. He wants to be here. He watches YouTube videos. He loves Minnesota. He keeps tweeting about how he loves Minnesota. Um, Finch loves him. I love Julius Randle so far. But yeah, it seems like he's kind of been the villain so far. Another guy I want to touch on very, very quickly. The other villain so far has been Joe Ingles. And
I think see,
like I
I don't
said,
even agree with that. I think it's been Jade McDaniels has been the real villain.
no, but okay. So all right, let me rephrase that. When I say villain, I mean the Timberwolves Twitter uh,
Okay.
the
Fair.
overreactors in my group chats, who they
Fair.
say like, "Oh, Joe Ingles sucks. Get Joe like." It used to be Cat. It always used to be like, "What the hell is Cat doing? Get him!" And now they have to move. They have to hate somewhere. So at the
Yep.
first game it was Randle, and now they don't really know where to go because everyone's playing so well. You can't hate on Jaden because everyone loves Jaden. So now they're looking and they find Ingles, and they're like, "What the get this? Why is this old guy playing?" But I don't think Joe Ingles is going to be playing much by the end of the season. I think right now, I think we're kind of using him to just kind of mend that. They're kind of make this transition a little bit easier before we start playing the rookies. I think it's too early right now to play him, but I think Ingles is going to be that early season guy, and I think as the season goes on, I think one of the rookies is going to step up and start taking Joe Ingles minutes. So I don't think he's a long term answer.
No, I mean he's averaging 5 minutes per game in 3 games. So like I would say like I haven't even really noticed Joe Ingles often. Like I think he's been decent passing. Like you've seen some pick and roll with him where he's feeding Rudy. So
Nice alley oop.
yeah, I mean he's kind of been like a net neutral. I don't know. I haven't really noticed him. Hasn't been too deficient anywhere. I think the guy who's like actually hurt the team the most this year has been Jaden. Like I think Jaden has had like the absolute worst case scenario stretch to start the season. It's the same stuff with the fouling, and it's the 3 point both attempts and shooting percentage going down. I think that's a little concerning. I won't lie. Like I think 2 years ago was kind of peak Jaden in the playoffs where he was hitting every open three he took. He was scoring 15 a game. He was locking everybody up. And then last year you saw the foul problems like really, really come a lot. And now this year it's like he can't even stay on the floor for regular minutes, and that's I think like I was talking about a lot of different rotations. He's kind of the main culprit why that's been a thing so far, is why
Yeah.
there's so many different pairings, is because Aiden is out of the game so much with the pairing he's supposed to be within.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you make. The other thing with Jaden is like I think it's kind of like a snowball effect with the fouls, and we saw this with Cat also. Um, the minute you get in foul trouble as a basketball player, that
You're
kind of is
hesitant.
something that's always in the back of your head on the offensive end, on the defensive end. And then once you start getting taken out of the game for long strip periods of time, say you get your third foul with 5 minutes left in the half, you're done for the half. Like these long stretches on the bench and playing with foul trouble, I think that really is affecting his offensive game as well. But I will say, to start the second half last night against the Raptors, he looked great. He looked like old Jaden McDaniels. I think he scored like the first 9 or 12 points. I don't know what it was, but he started off really strong to start the half. And yeah, I like I said, I think we never want to overreact with players like this. Jaden McDaniels has shown us for 4 years that he is a good basketball player with a lot of potential. But yeah, not a great start by him, and it's definitely not helping the team out. But
I
yeah,
got a, I got a hot take about him.
yeah,
I think that you know how they usually put him on like whoever the point of attack guy is for whatever team. Like the Lakers, it was LeBron and D'Lo. The Kings, it was De'Aaron Fox, and then the Raptors game, he had Scotty Barnes, and I think he had his best defensive game against Scotty Barnes because similar in stature, similar in height. It's a matchup that makes more sense positionally. I think where he gets into a lot of trouble is when he's guarding guys like way smaller than him. Like he really, really struggled with the De'Aaron Fox matchup. I think De'Aaron was too quick for him, and I think with the smaller guys too, like he tends to foul more, and I think it's like more of a it's like an imagery thing with the refs. Like they see a smaller guy and they see Jaden all over him and they call the fouls. I think he's really been struggling with like smaller guards, and I know he's probably the best option, but like with Nikhil available, I think you can bump Nikhil's minutes up even more to just kind of offset some of that fouling. And that like I think that's part of the reason Nikhil's been so good is he's been locking up those point of attack defenders plus hitting his threes, kind of like what we hope Jaden can do.
yeah. So
So it's
let me bring up this scenario for you. So Jaden McDaniels, when he's guarding the best player on the other team, he plays great defense most of the time, but you also risk him getting in foul trouble. Is his offensive um, productivity worth it to the point where we maybe don't want him always guarding the best player on the other team just so he can stay in the game offensively and be on the court? Is that where we're getting with Jaden McDaniels, or is he still that lethal of a defender where his offense doesn't matter at this point? Where it doesn't matter if he scores 0 points as long as he locks up their best player, he's still doing what his job is with the Timberwolves.
I don't even know if we can answer that question just this year because like he hasn't ever been in the flow to be able to like get
Mm-hmm.
his offense going. He's been subbed out of the game so much. He's been with so many random pairings that like I don't even know where his offense is at
But
this year.
can we say that with Jaden McDaniels, it doesn't his offense isn't really that important of a of his that's not really necessarily anything to do with how we judge him as a player. But then also, if you have him and Rudy Gobert, who are two of these completely defensive minded players, is that is that taken away from our offense too much? I don't
I
know.
think I personally think his offense is super tied into what he's doing defensively. Like if he's not getting fouls and he's playing good at defense, that's when it seems like the driving lanes start to open up for him too. He gets fast break points. I don't know, there's probably no correlation to this, but it seems like he hits more of his shots when he's not in
Oh
foul
no, there
trouble, and it
hundred
makes
percent is
sense.
100% is correlation, man. If you're locking a guy up, you're going to get more locked in. It's a game of confidence, and he seems like the type of guy who he probably sees a sports psychologist because he seems like he's always in his head like for the good when he's hitting shots and when he's a very polarizing player. I'll use that word for the second time this podcast, but he's either really good or really bad. Like it's very hard for Jaden McDaniels to have that middle ground, and I think that is this is something we might have to look at later in the future, maybe in a few years.
Yeah.
But I think some a player that polarizing is a dangerous player to have as one of the cornerstones of your franchise. That's
So
all I'll
so
say.
I'll say this. Like I think to your point, like is defense worth sacrificing on offense? I think in the playoffs, like I couldn't care less if he didn't take an entire shot the whole time he was out
But
there. If he's doing what he does defensively, that's totally fine. But to get these 1 or 2 or 3 seeds this regular season, like he's gonna have to be a contributor at some point
and he can
offensively.
be, and he
He
can
can.
be. We've
He can.
seen it.
We've
He's
seen it.
a great contributor. And when he's being a contributor, this team is like because we don't even like when we're going into the game looking for contributors, we don't even really look at him as one. So when he can be a contributor at a high level, it's just a bonus that we weren't even expecting. All right. So since we still have never turned to profit with this
Free
podcast,
Zoom.
we're still on free Zoom, so we got 4 minutes and 3 seconds left. First, I think we should touch on we hope to record this every single Sunday night. Me and Chris are going to be really good about that, um, and we're going to try to do every other week in person because I think that just adds a better dynamic. But also, we're going to do every other week on Zoom. So we're going to try to do this every Sunday. Try to get it out to you by Monday at the latest. But yeah, going into this week, Chris, what are you kind of looking for with the Wolves? Speed run, 30 seconds. Sure, you got to say.
Well, I'm looking to kind of see what we've seen from Julius Randle the last 2 games. Pretty high efficiency, good 3-point shooting, and kind of continue to find his role. I think hopefully we'll see Mike settle in a little bit more. I know we saw it uh, a little more last game, but I think he's still kind of been a little shaky. That's kind of my second point. And then third point, I want to see him win all the games, and I want to see him beat Denver on Friday. I think that's a pretty big statement game to make,
In person.
especially after the game 7. Yes, in
And we'll be
person.
there. I'm so excited for that. So we got the Mavericks and the Nuggets this week. Is that this what the slate's looking like?
Two like humongous statement
Games.
games. The
Easy.
powers of the West.
I think I'd be I'm always very modest. I'd be happy with a split here as long as we play both teams tight. But yeah, the Nuggets that seems to be kind of like a secondary rivalry game for us, and so I really want to see us beat the Nuggets, even though they might not be the same team that we've seen in years past. But yeah, really excited for those two games. Thank you for everyone who tuned in for the first episode. We got some good reactions, good comments. Always great to hear everyone in the comments. We actually do have a new challenge. I heard Chris talking about this. So one of our longest fans, I think for 5 years, this guy King Physique. What other names does he go by, Chris?
Wozai
Lozai, King Physique. You guys
King.
might know him from the notorious dance off he had with Chris. He sent us a dance. Chris matched the dance. We put them next to each other. And that's kind of just a little bit of fun we've had with the channel. So only if, we're not going to say this anywhere else except for in the last 1 minute of this podcast. If Woe's Eye or King Physique, if he's watching at this point and he comes up with a new Timberwolves dance, Chris will
Me?
Chris will. You said this is what you said. This is straight from your mouth. You said you will do the dance again, whatever he comes up with, and we will do a little rerun of what we did 4 years ago. Just to show.
If we hit 15 likes on this video, that's a fair goal. I think we can get 15.
I think we can do 15. Also, Luke, what's Luke's last name?
Hybrid.
Luke Hybrid. If he wants to come out with a new jingle song for the beginning of our podcast, we'd love to talk business with him and to kind of make that happen. Another side point, Greg Weasley, the biggest fan of our show. Huge news. He was living out in North Dakota. He got divorced. He moved back to Minnesota, and the rumors on the street are he's dating one of the Wolves dancers, living in the city. So shout out to Greg Weasley. Hopefully we can see you on the comment section. Chris, great talking to you as always, man. Good luck on the NCAA football field. You will need it tonight. As Bowling Green will be defeated by EMCC. We don't have enough time to explain that. Hope you guys have a great week. Go Wolves.
Tagging up the mouse, we do the mouse dog. Got a wretched in my coat, got a girl doing coke. We drink up and we smoke, but she always do the most. It kinda turned me on the way she licking on my stones. My chains on antifreeze, it look like I made a clone. Wanna see you get